The Velner people had lived in peace for 12,000 years. They had built beautiful cities made of crystal that shined like diamonds under the light of their suns. 17 different planets belonged to them, and on each one, millions of Velner lived happy lives. They had never known war. They had never needed weapons stronger than what their police carried. Peace was all they knew. Then the Kreeth came. Nobody knew where the Kreeth came from. They appeared in Velner space without warning, moving through the darkness like a disease. They were not machines, and they were not like any living creatures the Velner had ever seen. They were something in between, huge organisms that could survive in the void of space, each one as large as a warship. They traveled in swarms, thousands upon thousands of them, and they consumed everything they touched. The first Velner colony died in 3 days. The people there sent out desperate calls for help. But by the time rescue ships arrived, there was nothing left except debris and silence. The Kreeth had stripped the planet of every resource and moved on to the next target. Within 6 months, 14 of the 17 Velner worlds went dark. The remaining 3 planets tried to fight back, but their peaceful civilization had no weapons that could stop the swarm. Their defense ships were designed for rescue operations and exploration, not war. They felt like leaves before a storm. Commander Jacob Morris was on routine patrol when his ship picked up the signal. The EDF Vigilance was 3 weeks away from Earth, mapping unexplored regions of space that no human had ever visited before. It was boring work, the kind that made young officers dream of action and adventure. Jacob had served in the Earth Defense Fleet for 15 years, and he had never fired a weapon in anger. Humanity had been at peace for generations. The signal came through broken and weak, distorted by the vast distance it had traveled. Lieutenant Katie Sullivan was monitoring the communications station when she first heard it. She was a good officer, sharp and quick, and she knew immediately that something was wrong. "Captain, you need to hear this," Katie said, her voice tight with concern. Jacob walked over to her station and listened to the recording she had isolated. Through the static and interference, a voice spoke in a language the ship's computer struggled to translate. The words came through in pieces, but the meaning was clear enough. "We are the Velner, our worlds burn, our people die. We call to the gods of the void, to any who can hear us. Please, we beg you, help us before we are gone forever." The message repeated 3 times, then cut off. Katie played it again, and Jacob felt something cold settle in his stomach. This was not a drill. This was not a simulation. Somewhere out in the darkness, an entire civilization was being destroyed, and they were calling out to anyone who might listen. Where did this come from? Jacob asked. Katie brought up the navigation data on her screen. Best estimate puts the source about 3 weeks away at maximum speed. The signal is old, though. It could have been sent months ago. Jacob stared at the star chart, calculating distances and time. 3 weeks there, 3 weeks back. 6 weeks. Total, assuming they did not get involved in whatever was happening. But if they did get involved, if they found a war waiting for them, then who knew how long they would be gone? "Get me a full analysis of that message," Jacob ordered. "I want to know everything we can learn from it. Language patterns, technology level, everything." Lieutenant Brandon Cole, the tactical officer, turned in his seat. "Sir, are we really considering this? We do not know these people. We do not know what they are fighting. This could be a trap, or it could be real," Jacob said quietly. "And if it is real, then right now, people are dying while we stand here talking about it." He walked back to his command chair and sat down heavily. This was the kind of decision that could end a career. If he sent this message to Earth Command and they decided to investigate, it would commit human resources to an unknown situation. Ships, weapons, lives. But if he ignored it, if he deleted the message and continued his patrol like nothing had happened, he would spend the rest of his life wondering what might have been. "Send the message to Admiral Hayes at Central Command," Jacob said finally. "Priority 1 encryption. Tell them we have made first contact with an alien species, and they are asking for help." The transmission went out immediately, racing back toward Earth at faster than light speed. It would take 3 days for the message. to reach home, and then however long it took for the admirals and politicians to make their decision. Jacob knew that every hour of delay might mean thousands more dead on those distant worlds. He did not have to wait long for an answer, 72 hours after sending his report. Jacob received a response that made his heart race. It was not a polite acknowledgement or a request for more information. It was a direct order from the highest levels of Earth Defense Command. Commander Morris, you are hereby ordered to proceed at maximum speed to the coordinates you provided. The Third Fleet is being mobilized and will follow your position. You are authorized to make contact with the Velner people and offer whatever assistance is necessary. This is not a drill. This is not a training exercise. Earth is going to war. Admiral Hayes sends her regards and says she will see you there. Good luck, Commander. Humanity is counting on you. Jacob read the message 3 times to make sure he understood it correctly. In less than 3 days, Earth had decided to commit its military forces to helping complete strangers. No negotiations, no careful diplomatic process. Just a simple decision that if someone was calling for help, humanity would answer. All hands, this is the captain, Jacob said over the ship-wide intercom. We have new orders. We are proceeding at maximum speed to answer a distress call from an alien civilization under attack. The Third Fleet is being mobilized to support us. I will not lie to you. We do not know what we are flying into. We do not know if we will be enough to make a difference, but I do know this. Someone out there is dying, and they ask the universe for help. We are going to give it to them. Prepare for combat operations. This is what we train for. Morris out. The Vigilance turned toward the distant stars where the Velner were making their last stand. Behind them, at the Neptune staging point near Earth, 47 warships were gathering for the longest deployment in human history. Crews were saying goodbye to their families. Weapons were being loaded. Supplies were being stocked. The Velner had called to the gods for salvation. They were about to discover that humanity was no god, but they were something perhaps more dangerous. They were people who remembered what it felt like to be helpless, and they had sworn never to let it happen to anyone else if they could prevent it. The fire was rising, and it was coming fast. The Third Fleet gathered at Neptune in less than 3 days. It was the fastest mobilization in human history. 47 ships of various sizes and purposes formed up in perfect formation, waiting for the order to jump into the unknown. There were massive dreadnoughts with enough firepower to crack a moon, fast destroyers built for pursuit and interception, carriers filled with fighter craft, and support ships loaded with medical supplies and repair equipment. Admiral Karen Hayes stood on the bridge of her flagship, the EDF Retribution, watching the fleet complete its final checks. She was 53 years old and had spent her entire adult life in the Defense Fleet. She had never expected to lead humanity into its first interstellar war, but here she was, about to give the order that would change everything. All ships report ready. Admiral, said Commander Lisa Morgan from the operations station. Lisa had been Karen's right hand for 7 years, and there was nobody the Admiral trusted more. Karen looked at the holographic display that showed the route they would take. 3 weeks of faster-than-light travel through space that no human had ever mapped. 3 weeks to reach the Velner and whatever nightmare was killing them. She thought about the message they had received, that desperate call to the gods. The Velner did not know that humanity was coming. They did not know that help was on the way. They just knew they were dying. Open a channel to all ships, Karen ordered. Channel open. Admiral, replied the communications officer. Karen took a breath and spoke clearly so every member of her fleet could hear her. This is Admiral Hayes to all personnel. 3 weeks ago, we received a distress call from a civilization we have never met. The Velner are being destroyed by an enemy we know nothing about. They called out to the universe for help, and we are answering that call. I know many of you are scared. I know you are wondering if we are doing the right thing. I want you to understand something. We are going to help these people because it is the right thing to do. Not because we will gain something from it. Not because they can pay us back. But because when someone is dying and they ask for help, Decent people answer. We are those people. We are humanity. And we do not abandon those who call out in the darkness. Haze out. The fleet jumped to faster than light speed in perfect coordination. One moment they were near Neptune, with the distant sun a bright point behind them. The next moment, they were racing through the strange realm between stars, where normal space did not exist and time moved differently. 3 weeks would pass on their ships, but back on Earth, only days would go by. The crew of the Vigilance had been waiting at the rally point for 2 days when the fleet arrived. Jacob Morris felt relief wash over him when he saw the massive formation drop out of faster-than-light travel. He had worried that Earth might change its mind, that the politicians would decide this was too risky. But here they were, 47 ships ready for war. Signal from the Retribution, Katie reported. Admiral Hayes wants a full briefing on everything we have learned. Jacob had spent the past 2 days analyzing every piece of data they had on the Velner and their enemy. It was not much. The message had been desperate and brief, and there had been no follow-up transmissions. Either the Velner could not send more messages, or there was nobody left to send them. The briefing took place over a secure channel, with all the ship captains and senior officers participating. Jacob shared what little intelligence they had, and the mood grew darker as he spoke. We estimate the Kreeth swarm has destroyed at least 14 Velner worlds, Jacob explained. Based on the message, there may be only 3 planets left. We do not know if the Velner are still fighting or if they have already fallen. We do not know the capabilities of the Kreeth or their numbers. We are going in completely blind. Then we will learn fast, Karen said firmly. All ships will maintain tight formation until we have visual contact with the enemy. Once we know what we are facing, we will adapt. Humanity has been fighting wars for 10,000 years. We are very good at it. The combined fleet made the final jump 3 weeks after leaving Neptune. When they emerged at the edge of Velner space, what they found was worse than anyone had imagined. Oh God, Lieutenant Danny Park whispered from the sensor station on the Vigilance. Captain, you need to see this. The tactical display showed a graveyard. Debris fields marked where entire planets had been stripped of life. Shattered stations drifted in the void. And everywhere, moving through the wreckage like sharks through blood-filled water, were the Kreeth. They were massive, each one the size of a destroyer. They had no obvious ships or technology. They were the ships, biological creatures that could somehow survive and move through the vacuum of space. Their bodies were covered in thick armor-like hide, and they had organs that glowed with energy, probably weapons of some kind. There were hundreds of them visible on the sensors, maybe thousands more beyond scanning range. Status on the fleet, Jacob demanded, his voice tight. All ships have emerged successfully, Katie reported. Admiral Hayes is requesting tactical assessment. Before anyone could respond, the sensors lit up with new contacts. The Kreeth had detected the human fleet. A large group of them, perhaps 300, broke away from what they were doing and turned toward the newcomers. They moved fast, faster than ships that size should be able to move. Battle stations, Jacob ordered. All weapons online. Tell the Admiral the enemy is coming to say hello. On the Retribution, Karen watched the Kreeth swarm racing toward her fleet. She had fought in simulations and war games her entire career, but this was different. This was real. Those creatures had killed billions of innocent people, and now they were coming for humanity. All ships execute Formation Delta 7, she commanded calmly. Maintain spacing and watch your firing lanes. Railguns to full power. Missile tubes armed and ready. Let us show these things what happens when they pick a fight with Earth. The Kreeth hit the human formation like a tsunami striking a seawall. They came in fast and hard, their bioweapons firing beams of energy that could cut through armor. The destroyer EDF Javelin took a direct hit and exploded, killing everyone aboard in an instant. 2 corvettes were torn apart by concentrated fire, but humanity hit back harder. The railguns opened up, firing solid slugs of metal at a significant fraction of light speed. The kinetic energy alone was devastating. Kreeth bodies ruptured and exploded. The missiles followed, thousands of them, each one guided by computers that could track a grain of sand in a hurricane. The space between the fleets turned into a hell of explosions and energy beams. "Target down," Brandon reported from the Vigilance. 3 more closing from above. Jacob pulled the ship into a hard turn, letting the missiles streak past. 2 hit the pursuing Kreeth and the creatures tumbled away, trailing fluids into the void. The 3rd one got close enough that Jacob could see it through the viewport, a nightmare of organic armor and glowing weapons. He triggered the point defense guns, and high-velocity rounds tore it to pieces. The fighter squadrons launched from the carriers, adding their numbers to the chaos. Lieutenant Chris Bennett led the first wing, his cockpit displays showing so many targets that the computer could barely track them all. His squadron had trained together for 5 years. They knew each other's moves like dancers knew their partners. "Focus fire on the big ones," Chris transmitted to his wing. "The small ones will fall apart without coordination." They dove into the swarm, missiles and cannons blazing. Chris saw a massive Kreeth that seemed to be directing the others, its body pulsing with light. He locked onto it and fired everything he had. His wingman, Lieutenant Amy Price, added her weapons to his. The creature shuddered under the combined assault and began to drift, its coordination signals failing. Without the coordinator, the smaller Kreeth became confused. They still fought, but without the organized tactics they had used before. The human fleet pressed the advantage, moving in tight formations that let them concentrate their fire. On the Retribution, Karen watched the battle evolve. They were winning, but the cost was high. 6 ships destroyed, dozens damaged, hundreds of crew members dead or wounded. But the Kreeth were dying faster. "Admiral, we are detecting a planetary body ahead," Lisa reported. "It is showing signs of life. Velner life signs." Karen felt her heart lift. They were not too late. At least one world still survived. "All ships, push forward," she ordered. "Clear a path to that planet. And get me a landing force. We are taking this fight to the ground." The call for volunteers went out across the fleet within minutes. Major Kelly Wright, commander of the 3rd Marine Battalion, did not need to ask twice. Every single Marine under her command stepped forward. 200 of humanity's finest warriors, trained for combat in every environment from city streets to the void of space itself. They gathered in the drop bay of the assault carrier EDF Hammer, checking weapons and armor while the space battle continued to rage above them. Kelly walked among her troops, meeting their eyes, making sure each one understood what they were about to do. They were going to drop into an active war zone, into a fight they knew almost nothing about, to help people they had never met. "Listen up," Kelly shouted over the noise of the bay. "Intelligence says there are Kreeth ground forces surrounding the last Velner city. We are going to land right in the middle of them. Our mission is simple. Kill anything that is not Velner. Protect the civilians. And stay alive while doing it. The Admiral says we are the cavalry riding to the rescue. Let us make sure we look the part." The Marines cheered, slamming fists against their armored chests. They were scared, Kelly could see it in their eyes, but they were also ready. This was what they had trained for their entire lives. The dropships launched while the battle still burned in orbit above them. 20 heavy assault craft, each carrying 10 Marines plus weapons and equipment. They hit the atmosphere hard, shields glowing red from the heat and friction. Several ships took fire from Kreeth-flying creatures that patrolled the skies, but the point defense systems shot most of them down. Sergeant Ryan Cooper gripped his rifle tight as the dropship bucked and shook around him. He had done 100 training drops, but this was his first real combat insertion. Around him, his squad checked their gear one last time. They had been together for 3 years. They trusted each other with their lives. Through the viewport, Ryan could see the planet below. It was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents. Not so different from Earth, and there, near the equator, was the city. It looked like it had been grown rather than built. Towers of living crystal that caught the sunlight and threw it back in rainbow colors. But around the city, like a disease eating at healthy flesh, was the Kreeth ground force. There were thousands of them. Smaller than the space-going versions, but still large enough to tear a human apart with ease. They had surrounded the city completely, attacking the walls with biological weapons and sheer numbers. The Velner defenders were fighting hard, their energy weapons cutting down Kreeth by the dozens. But they were being overwhelmed. 30 seconds, the pilot called back. Kelly activated the command channel. All units, this is actual. We land hot and move fast. First wave secures the landing zone. Second wave pushes to the city walls. Third wave provides fire support. By the numbers, people. Let us do this right. 10 seconds. Weapons free. The dropships hit the ground in a perfect V formation, ramps dropping before the landing skids had fully settled. Marines poured out like water from a burst dam, immediately engaging the surprised Kreeth forces. The sound was deafening. A wall of gunfire and explosions that rolled across the battlefield. Ryan's boots hit the dirt, and he was moving, rifle up and firing in controlled bursts. A Kreeth turned toward him, its mouth opening to reveal rows of teeth like knives. Ryan put 3 rounds through its head, and it dropped. Another one came from the side, and his squad mate, Corporal Lisa Hayes, took it down with a grenade that turned the creature into smoking pieces. "Move, move, move!" Ryan shouted, leading his squad forward. They advanced by fire teams, one group moving while the other provided covering fire. It was basic infantry tactics, taught in every military academy since humans first learned to fight in organized units. The Kreeth had never faced anything like it. Kelly's command group pushed through the Kreeth lines like a knife through soft flesh. The creatures were tough and fast, but they fought like animals, all instinct and rage. Humanity had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing, and it showed. Every Marine was a precision instrument of war, their movements coordinated, their fire disciplined. "We are through the first line," Kelly reported to the Hammer. "Pushing to the city walls now. Resistance is heavy but manageable." The Velner defenders on the walls watched in shock as the human forces carved a path through the siege. They had been fighting alone for months, watching their people die, knowing that each day might be their last. And now, these strange warriors had appeared from the sky, fighting with a fury that seemed almost supernatural. Irith, the Velner military commander, stood on the highest wall and tried to understand what he was seeing. The humans were smaller than Velner, but they moved like predators. Their weapons were loud and crude compared to Velner energy rifles, but they were brutally effective. Every shot seemed to find a target. Every movement had purpose. "Who are they?" asked Pallas, his second in command. The young Velner warrior looked exhausted. His armor cracked and his weapon nearly drained of power. "They answered our call," Irith said quietly, feeling something he had not felt in months. Hope. A squad of Marines reached the base of the wall. And their leader, a human woman in heavy armor, looked up at Irith. She raised her hand in what he assumed was a greeting, then spoke. Her words came through a translation device. "Major Kelly Wright, Earth Defense Force, we got your message. Sorry it took us a while to get here." Irith felt his legs go weak. They had come. Despite the distance, despite not knowing the Velner, despite every logical reason to stay away, these humans had come to help. "We are grateful beyond words," Irith managed to say. "We had given up hope." "Save the thanks for after we win," Kelly said. "What is your tactical situation? Where do you need us most?" Irith quickly explained the siege. The Kreeth had been attacking for 3 months, wearing down the defenders bit by bit. The Velner had strong walls and good weapons, but they were running out of ammunition and energy. The western wall was close to breaking, and once the Kreeth got inside the city, it would be over. "Right," Kelly said. "We will reinforce the western wall. You keep hitting them from above. Between your people and mine, we will break the siege." The combined human-Velner defense changed everything. The Kreeth had been fighting defenders who were exhausted and nearly out of supplies. Now they faced fresh troops with full ammunition loads and the will to use them. The human Marines moved through the battlefield like professionals, supporting the Velner soldiers, covering weak points. and killing Kreeth with efficient brutality, Ryan's squad took up position on the western wall, adding their fire to the Velner defenders. The Kreeth were pushing hard here, trying to overwhelm the defenses through sheer numbers. Bodies piled up at the base of the wall, but more kept coming. "Contact left!" Lisa shouted, pointing at a group of Kreeth trying to climb the wall using their claws. Ryan swung his rifle around and fired, the heavy rounds punching through alien flesh. The creatures fell, but 3 more took their place. A Velner soldier next to Ryan fired his energy weapon until it overheated, then drew a blade and prepared to fight hand-to-hand. Ryan handed him a spare magazine for a human rifle. "Try this," Ryan said through his translator. "Point and shoot? Simple." The Velner took the magazine with shaking hands and loaded it into the weapon Ryan showed him. When the next Kreeth came over the wall, the Velner soldier fired and watched in satisfaction as the creature died. He looked at Ryan with something like wonder in his eyes. "Your weapons are very loud," the Velner said. "Yeah," Ryan replied, firing again. "But they work." Above the planet, the space battle was ending. The Kreeth swarm, having lost their coordinators and taken massive casualties, began to pull back. Admiral Hayes watched them retreat on her tactical display and made a decision. "Do not pursue," she ordered. "We have wounded to treat and a planet to secure. All ships establish defensive orbit around the planet. Get medical teams down to the surface immediately." On the ground, the Kreeth siege broke within hours. Without reinforcements from space and facing determined resistance from 2 different species, the creatures scattered and ran. Human gunships hunted them down, making sure none escaped to regroup. As the sun set on the battlefield, Kelly stood with Irith on the walls and looked out at what they had accomplished. The ground was covered with dead Kreeth, but the city still stood. The Velner had survived. "We called to the gods," Irith said softly. "We did not think anyone would hear." Kelly shook her head. "We are not gods. We are just people who heard someone asking for help." "Perhaps," Irith replied. "But you came from fire and fought like ancient warriors of legend. If that is not divine, I do not know what is." Kelly smiled behind her helmet. "That is just humanity. Someone needed help. We gave it. That is what we do." The 3 days after the battle were a blur of activity. Medical teams from the human fleet worked alongside Velner doctors to treat the wounded from both species. Engineers helped repair the damaged city walls. Supply ships brought food and medicine to people who had been under siege for months. Admiral Corinne Hayes walked through the Velner city with a security detail, marveling at the architecture. The buildings were made from some kind of living crystal that grew in organic patterns. It was beautiful in a way that human construction could never match. But everywhere she looked, she saw the scars of war, burn marks on the walls, buildings that had collapsed, empty spaces where people should have been. A Velner child approached her cautiously, holding what looked like a flower made of the same crystal as the buildings. The child, no more than 6 or 7 in human years, looked up at Corinne with large eyes and offered the flower. Corinne took it carefully, touched by the gesture. "Thank you," she said. Hoping her translator would convey her meaning, the child smiled and ran back to its mother, who nodded gratefully at Corinne. The Admiral felt a weight in her chest. This is why they had come. Not for glory or conquest, but for moments like this. For children who could grow up safe. Because someone decided to help, Irith found her an hour later in what had been the city's command center. The Velner commander looked exhausted, but at peace in a way he had not been since the Kreeth first arrived. He had spent 3 months watching his people die, making impossible decisions about who to save and who to abandon. Now, with human help, they had a chance. "Admiral Hayes," Irith said formally, "I have been asked to speak with you on behalf of our surviving government. We wish to express our gratitude and discuss what comes next." Corinne nodded and followed him to a conference room that overlooked the city. Through the windows she could see human and Velner working side by side, clearing debris and rebuilding defenses. It was a good sight. "Commander Irith, I need to be honest with you," Corinne said. "My fleet took significant casualties in the battle. We lost 6 ships and over 3,000 personnel. We have wounded that need proper medical facilities. We need to return to Earth soon. Irith looked stricken. You are leaving? But the Kreeth could return. We cannot defend ourselves alone. I know, Karen said gently. That is why I am recommending that Earth establish a permanent defense force here. A joint operation between our species. We will help you rebuild your military and teach you how to fight. But Irith, you need to understand something. We did not come here to conquer you. We are not going to rule over you or demand payment. We helped because it was right, not because we wanted something from you. Irith was quiet for a long moment, processing this. In his experience, nobody did anything without expecting something in return. The fact that humans had lost 3,000 of their own people to save strangers was almost incomprehensible. Why? He asked finally. Why would you do this? We are nothing to you. You did not even know we existed until weeks ago. Karen smiled sadly. Because a long time ago, humanity nearly died out. We fought wars that almost destroyed our entire species. We learned what desperation feels like. What it is like to think you are the last ones left. And we decided that if we survived, if we made it through, we would never let it happen to anyone else if we could prevent it. You called for help. We answered. It is that simple. It is not simple, Irith said. It is extraordinary. Most species would have calculated the cost and decided we were not worth saving. You did not hesitate. Maybe that makes us foolish, Karen admitted. Or maybe it makes us human. Either way, it is who we are. Over the next several days, human and Velner officials worked together to establish formal relations between their species. It was strange and awkward at times. The Velner communicated partially through color changes in their skin, something the human translators struggled to interpret. Humans spoke more directly than Velner were comfortable with. But both sides tried hard to understand each other. Jacob Morris spent most of his time working with Velner scientists, sharing information about human technology and learning about Velner innovations. The Velner had been exploring space for thousands of years longer than humanity, and they had made discoveries in energy manipulation and materials. Science that Earth scientists could barely understand. Your species is very young, said a Velner scientist named Kieran. You're also very aggressive. You have weapons that we never thought to develop because we never needed them. Now we wish we had. Jacob shrugged. Humanity has always been good at fighting. We have had a lot of practice, unfortunately. But we are also good at helping. At working together. Maybe that is what the galaxy needs. Species that are willing to stand together against threats like the Kreeth. You speak of the galaxy as if there are many other species, Kiran said. There are. We have encountered 12 other civilizations in our explorations. Most of them are peaceful, like us. A few are dangerous. None of them came when we called for help. That statement hung in the air between them. The Velner had called out to their neighbors, to species they had known for centuries, and received only silence in return. But humanity, complete strangers from across the galaxy, had mobilized their entire military to help. The news of the battle spread quickly through Velner communication networks. Within days, every surviving Velner knew that aliens called humans had saved them from extinction. Stories spread about the warriors who had dropped from the sky, who had fought with ancient fury, who had stood side by side with Velner soldiers on the walls. Some Velner began to call the humans the old gods, warriors from legend who had promised to return in the darkest hour. Karen tried to discourage this talk, but she understood it. The Velner had been desperate, and humanity had appeared at their moment of greatest need. It was natural for them to see something supernatural in that timing. On the 5th day after the battle, a memorial service was held for the fallen. 3,217 humans had died in the fight to save the Velner. The names were read aloud, one by one, in both human and Velner languages. It took hours. Irith stood beside Karen during the ceremony, watching as human and Velner mourned together. He thought about those names, those individuals who had died for his people. They had volunteered to come here knowing they might not return. They had fought and bled for strangers. We will remember them, Iris said quietly. Every one of those names will be carved into our monuments. Our children will learn them. Your people will never be forgotten by the Velner. Karen felt tears on her face but did not wipe them away. They did their duty. They saved lives. That is all any soldier can ask for. It is more than that, Iris insisted. They proved that the universe is not dark and cruel. That somewhere out there, people still care about strangers. Your species has given us back hope, Admiral. That is a gift beyond measure. The Third Fleet prepared to depart a week after the battle. They left behind a small garrison of Marines and a diplomatic team to help the Velner rebuild. Earth had promised to send more support, including engineers and teachers who could help the Velner develop their own defense forces. As the Retribution prepared to jump back to human space. Karen stood on her bridge one last time and looked at the planet below. Somewhere down there, Velner children were playing in streets that had been battlefields days ago. Families were reuniting. People were starting to rebuild their lives. All ships report ready for jump, Lisa reported. Take us home, Karen ordered. The fleet jumped, leaving behind a grateful civilization and carrying with them a story that would change the galaxy forever. Humanity had announced itself to the universe not with threats or demands, but with sacrifice and courage. The Velner would make sure everyone knew what had happened here. The Velner did not keep the story to themselves. Within weeks of the battle, they had transmitted detailed accounts of what happened to every civilization they had ever contacted. The message was simple and powerful. An unknown species called humanity had heard their distress call and crossed vast distances to save them. These humans had lost thousands of their own people fighting for strangers. They had asked for nothing in return. The galaxy reacted with shock and disbelief. The Korthan hierarchy, a military empire that controlled 15 systems, analyzed the human tactics and weaponry with growing concern. A species that could mobilize so quickly and fight so effectively was a potential threat, but a species that would do so for complete strangers was unprecedented and unpredictable. The Mendari Confederation, peaceful traders who had known the Velner for generations, felt shame that they had not answered the call themselves. They had calculated the risks and decided it was not worth the cost. Now they had to live with the knowledge that strangers had been braver than they were. The Zenth Collective, ancient beings who had explored the galaxy for millennia, took special notice. They had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, and they understood patterns of behavior. What humanity had done was statistically impossible. Rational beings did not sacrifice themselves for strangers. Yet the humans had done exactly that. On Earth, the mood was complicated. President Linda Shaw stood before the World Assembly and faced a room full of angry and grieving representatives. 3,000 people had died. 6 warships had been destroyed. The financial cost of the operation was enormous. And for what? To save aliens that most humans had never heard of before? We had no right to commit our military without approval from this body, shouted Representative Marcus Webb. You sent our people to die for strangers without even consulting us. Linda let him speak. Let the anger wash over her, then stood and addressed the assembly. Her voice was calm but firm. Representative Webb is correct. We made a decision quickly, without the usual diplomatic process. But I want everyone in this room to imagine something. Imagine you are dying. Imagine your children are dying. Imagine you send out one last desperate call for help, not knowing if anyone will hear or care. And then imagine that help arrives. That strangers risk their lives to save you? How would that feel? The room was silent. The Velner were dying, Linda continued. Every hour we delayed meant more dead. We had a choice. We could have formed committees and debated and calculated costs while people died. Or we could do what was right. We chose to help. And yes, it cost us. 3,000 brave men and women gave their lives. But because of them, an entire civilization survives. Their children will grow up. Their culture will continue. That is what our people died for. That is what makes it worth it. The vote that followed was close, but ultimately the Assembly approved the mission retroactively. More importantly, they voted to establish a formal policy. If Earth received a distress call from any civilization facing extinction, they would respond. Humanity would be the species that answered when others called for help. Not everyone agreed with this decision. There were protests. People who thought Earth should focus on its own problems, not waste resources on aliens. But the majority supported it. Humanity had survived its own near extinction. And they remembered what that felt like 6 months after the battle. Commander Jacob Morris stood on the bridge of the Vigilance, now assigned to permanent patrol duty in Velner space. His crew was a mix of human and Velner officers, an experiment in cooperation that was working better than anyone expected. His executive officer was, still, Lieutenant Katie Sullivan, recently promoted to full commander. His cultural liaison was a Velner named Soren who had fought on the walls during the siege. Soren had volunteered to serve aboard a human ship, wanting to learn more about the species that had saved his people. "It is strange," Soren said one day while they watched the mixed crew work together. 6 months ago, we did not know your species existed. Now we train together, fight together, live together. Jacob smiled. That is how it starts. First you meet during a crisis, then you work together. Before you know it, you are friends. The other species in the galaxy are frightened of you, Soren admitted. They see how quickly you mobilized, how effectively you fight, how you did all of that for strangers. They do not understand. Katie, who was monitoring the communication station, turned to join the conversation. What is there to understand? Someone needed help. We helped them. That is what frightens them, Soren explained. Most species carefully calculate every decision. They weigh costs and benefits. They act only when it serves their interests. You heard strangers crying and immediately sent your military. No negotiation. No demands for payment. Just action. That kind of commitment, that kind of fury on behalf of others, it is not logical. It is not how rational beings behave. Jacob thought about that for a moment. Maybe that is what makes us human. We are not always logical. We do not always make the smart choice. But we remember what it is like to be alone and afraid. And we decided a long time ago that we would never let that happen to anyone else if we could prevent it. Even if it costs you everything? Soren asked. Even then, Jacob confirmed, back on Earth, life slowly returned to normal. The families of the fallen received honors and compensation, though nothing could replace the people they had lost. Memorials were built. Names were carved in stone. The sacrifice was not forgotten. But something had changed in humanity's relationship with the universe. They were no longer alone. They had friends now, allies who would fight beside them. And more importantly, they had shown the galaxy what they stood for. Admiral Karen Hayes retired from active service 2 years after the Battle of Velner Prime. She had spent her entire adult life in the defense fleet. But now she was tired. She wanted to rest, to spend time with her family, to let someone else carry the burden. At her retirement ceremony, surrounded by officers and politicians, someone asked her what she wanted her legacy to be. Karen thought about the question for a long time before answering. "I want people to know that if they call for help, someone will answer," she said finally. "We started something here. We showed the galaxy that not everyone is selfish. That some people care about strangers, that humanity, for all our flaws, will stand with those who need standing for. That is what I want to be remembered for." The message spread further. Species that had been rivals for centuries saw how humans and Velner worked together and wondered if cooperation might be possible. Civilizations that had been isolationists started to reach out to their neighbors. Trade increased. Cultural exchanges began. The galaxy was changing, slowly but surely. The Velner became humanity's strongest advocates. They told everyone who would listen about the day the humans came. About warriors who dropped from the sky like ancient gods. About people who crossed the void to save strangers. The story grew with each telling, but the core truth remained. Humanity had heard a desperate call and answered without hesitation. They had fought with ancient fury and modern precision. They had lost thousands of their own but never considered retreating. And when the battle was won, they had asked for nothing except friendship. 10 years after the battle, the Vellner finished construction on a monument at the site where the human Marines had first landed. It was a massive structure of living crystal, shaped to catch the light and throw it across the city. Carved into the base were 3,217 names. The humans who had died so that strangers might live. At the dedication ceremony, Irith, now old and gray but still serving his people, spoke to a crowd of both Vellner and humans. "We called to the gods in our darkest hour," he said. "We did not expect an answer. We did not expect salvation. But humanity came. They came from fire and fought with the fury of ancient warriors. They showed us that the universe is not dark and empty, that somewhere out there, people still believe in helping strangers. This monument stands not just for those who died, but for what they represented. Hope, courage, sacrifice. These are the human gifts to the galaxy. May we never forget them." The crowd was silent for a long moment, then the Vellner began their traditional song of remembrance. The humans joined in, their voices mixing with the alien melody, creating something new and beautiful. Commander Jacob Morris, now captain of the Joint Defense Station that orbited the planet, watched the ceremony from space. He thought about that first distress call, the desperate plea that had started everything. The Vellner had called to the gods and humanity had answered. Not because they were gods, but because they were human and humans helped people who needed help. It was as simple and as complicated as that. The story would echo across the stars for generations. The tale of the species that answered when strangers called. The warriors who came from fire with ancient fury. The people who taught the galaxy that some things like compassion and courage were worth more than calculations of cost and benefit. Humanity had found its place in the universe, not as conquerors or merchants, but as defenders, as the ones who answered the call, as the species that remembered what it felt like to be desperate and alone, and